This may come as a surprise given my line of work, but I'm not really a camera guy. Sure, my Sony, my Fuji, my smartphones, I love shooting with them, but I just never got into camera culture all that much.
That being said, the world of cameras is a lot like the world of the old timepiece. Even if you don't, get it, you can't deny the allure of a well-made piece of hardware, with those precision details and mechanical textures so often missing from today's smartphone world. So when camera legend Leica designed a new carapace for one of the most curious camera phones of 2021, I knew I wanted to take it for a spin. Even if it took until nearly 2022 for me to get a hold of one. Yes, as you may have heard, the Leica Leitz Phone 1 is technically a rebadge of the Aquos R6 from Sharp Corporation. In fact, that's how it still identifies itself in the EXIF data from its photos. But maybe you can see, in this video from Ben's Gadget Reviews, why I wasn't all that interested in covering the Aquos. I mean, take away the huge camera and you're left with a phone that could easily be confused for many others. Well, there's no such danger with the Leitz Phone 1. Not since the days of the Nokia Lumia line have we gotten such an assertive contrast of curves and right angles. The matte black Gorilla Glass back is a perfect contrast to the satin silver side rails, whose anodized aluminum has been textured like the edges of a coin to give the phone more grip than I've felt since the Red Hydrogen 1. The display is a curved IGZO OLED that's deeper than anything I've ever seen. It's not just that Leica ships it with an insanely high color saturation setting, it's the contrast. Dark portions of images or interfaces appear almost Vanta black in their depth. It's a truly striking screen, heightened by an Android 11 skin that's minimal without skidding over the ledge into boring. Leica's trademark font, which incidentally is called LG 1050, is not slathered over every part of the interface, but instead tastefully meted out in small doses from the lock screen to the camera, whose massive module serves as potent punctuation even without its one-of-a-kind, utterly over-the-top magnetic lens cap. As I said in my Weird Phones Roundup back in December, this bit of vanity design is exactly the kind of ridiculous that a phone like this calls for. Some of you asked me if it makes using the camera harder, and the honest answer is yes. You have to take the lens cap off to shoot, which turns what should be a one-handed job into a two-hand operation. And I wish Leica had given it a magnetic landing zone, so I could stick it to the back when I'm shooting and then replace it when I'm done. At the very least, it would have been a nice excuse for the failure to include wireless charging. If I ever do lose the lens cap, I'm not wild about having to shell out almost $100 to get a replacement. While we're discussing things I'd have done differently, I wish the backplate were leather, like a proper camera, and I wish the bonus button we got was a proper two-stage shutter release down here, instead of a Google Assistant button up here. But let's remember that this is a rebadge, and I imagine Leica was only willing to spend so much to turn a Sharp into a Leitz. And on the whole, I think this is one of the most fetching phone designs I've seen. One that, in my opinion, does justice to the Leica founder after whom it's named.
Now, sometimes great design comes at the cost of fundamentals, but with one glaring exception, that's not the case here. This is a solid smartphone.
Sure, it muddles through with last year's top-shelf Snapdragon processor instead of this year's, but that's still a very capable chipset. The phone is very fast, and that speed is amplified by the screen, which seems to use black frame insertion to produce an apparent 240 Hz refresh rate. And, even if that's technically just 120, it feels and looks incredible. And that performance is backed up by bonuses that are rare in modern phones. Micro SD storage expansion, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and the excellent 3D ultrasonic fingerprint sensor. It takes 1/10 of the time to train a new fingerprint, and it can read 2 prints at the same time. That means if you decide to split the enormous cost of this phone with a partner, you can each scan your own fingerprint, and then it won't unlock unless you're both present. On the cellular side, the Leitz Phone 1 worked well between New York City and my rural roots on eastern Long Island on both T-Mobile and AT&T. And because it's an import phone, I did have to spend a few minutes manually entering my APN settings, after which I had no data issues and no complaints about voice quality on either end of my calls. The whole package is powered by one of the biggest batteries you can find on a phone of this size, and it shows. I can't recall a single time over the past month that I've gone to bed with less than 20% left. The dreaded exception I mentioned is not the vibration motor, though that is pretty terrible. It's the phone's touch response. Almost half the time when I try to swipe home, it takes more than one attempt before the phone registers the gesture. I've tried holding it differently, I've tried disabling the auto-scrolling, enabling glove mode, and I've cross-referenced with 3 other reviewers who've used the device, 2 of whom also reported this bad touch response. Folks, losing a lens cap? That's on me. Having to import a SIM card from Japan to update the software? Well, that's life on an out-of-market device. But not being able to swipe home or scroll or even sometimes type because of weird touch issues? It's unacceptable on any phone, let alone one as expensive as this.
Finally, if we assume those bugs get ironed out somehow, let's talk about the biggest reason to buy this thing, the camera. And I'm talking specifically about still photos, not the video mode, which overheats all the time. In fact, it's getting ready to overheat right now, so let's just get to those photographs.
Every time you unlock the screen, that LFI widget is there to inspire you with its photos shot on Leica cameras. And when you want to shoot your own, this camera is a true optical oddity. Don't let that second lens fool you. That's a time-of-flight module. There's just one shooting sensor behind this 19mm equivalent lens, and it's the same 1-inch model that powers Sony's RX100 Mark IV point-and-shoot. Yes, that's an older generation sensor than the one behind the Xperia Pro I that I reviewed recently, but Leica uses much more of the sensor area to produce a 20-megapixel photo. And in addition to the extra resolution, you get incredibly pronounced depth of field. The phone isn't using software fakery to do this. There's no artificial processing that, misses a hair or screws up your eyeglasses. It's natural separation of blurry background bokeh and tack-sharp subject. Now, if your Instagram audience is the type that wouldn't know the difference, well, they will when you toggle Leica Looks. And before you say it, yes, it's a black and white photo, and yes, of course, you can take any photo taken by any smartphone and just pull the color out of it. You don't even need a fancy program. You just take a shot like this one from the Pixel 6, you drop the saturation to 0, and bam, black and white. But now, compare that with the Leitz Looks photo. It's not just removing color information, it's applying a profile based on the Leica M monochrome camera. The contrast is higher, the attitude is sharper, and in the parlance of black and white photographers, the overall effect is harder. When I took a moody photo walk on a drizzly Christmas morning, that Leitz look was perfect for the overcast light box of a day that greeted me. Now, Leica isn't the only company doing this. Probably the coolest example is the X-Pan mode that Hasselblad recently brought to the OnePlus 9 Pro. But Leitz Looks is great, and if I could pay to use it on other phones, I absolutely would. Sadly, though, falling out of love with this camera really only took a trip back to the city, because when it comes to mobile photos, there's great, there's good, and then there's baddies. Yeah, as powerful as its hardware is, the only times I found the Leitz phone really sang was when I was shooting evenly exposed landscapes or other static, frankly simple scenes. There's often extreme shutter lag, so photographing animals or kids is very difficult. There's no proper telephoto camera, so you have to settle for digital crop if you want to get closer. And most importantly, I have to echo Ben Sen's conclusions. In the mobile world, we're well into the age of computational photography, where processing is as or more important than the hardware. And Sharp and Leica are far behind Google and Apple when it comes to that computational approach. If the Leitz Phone 1 came from a different kind of company, I'd still say that maybe it's worth the price for some folks. After all, this is an enthusiast device, not unlike a gaming phone. People don't necessarily buy an ROG phone because they want to be better at Genshin Impact. They also do it as an expression of identity. The Leitz Phone 1 is the same. It conveys at the very least an appreciation for the tools of the trade, where photography is concerned, and its design alone might be reason enough for an iconoclast of a certain taste to shell out the $1,700 or so needed to import it from Japan. But when that design is based on a 100-plus year legacy of delivering outstanding cameras, well, in my view, the one place you can't compromise is in the camera. And sadly, compromise is just what Leica has done here. I hope there's a Leitz Phone 2 someday. I hope it's a redemption story, and I hope it comes to more markets than just one. If you'd like to see something closer to Leica's core competency, my buddy David ML has just reviewed its M11 camera over at MKBHD's The Studio, and I'll link that video below. This review was made possible via a device loan from Qualcomm, but as always, neither Qualcomm nor Leica nor any other company was given copy approval rights, any editorial input, or a sneak peek at this content. They're seeing it for the first time, right alongside you. Till next time, I've been Michael Fisher. Thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.